Hello everyone, welcome back to a new lesson. In today's lesson we are going to look at gerunds and infinitives, which can be quite a difficult grammar point. We will look at which verbs should be followed with the gerund. Then we will look at some common verbs which are followed by the infinitive. Next we will look at verbs which are formed with verb plus the object, i.e. somebody, plus the ing form of the verb. Next we will look at verb plus object plus infinitive. We will also look at which verbs typically take the bare infinitive, which is the infinitive without to, and also verbs which take the object plus the bare infinitive. You may or may not know that some verbs in English can be followed by the gerund or infinitive with basically no difference in meaning. And then there are a small number of verbs, and these are the ones that tend to cause more problems, which can be followed by both, but the meaning changes. So we will be sure to look at those as well. And then finally, to finish today's lesson, we will do a little quiz. If all that sounds good to you, let's take a look at our first section.
It can be quite difficult sometimes to remember whether you need a gerund or an infinitive when you need or you want to use another verb followed by your first verb. So it can be useful to learn the verbs that always take the infinitive and the verbs that always take the gerund. And the first point is looking at verbs that always take the ing form or the gerund form, as we call it, of the verb. So let's take a look at some of those common verbs which are always followed by ing. We have enjoy, avoid, admit. Admit is a bit interesting because sometimes it takes the preposition to. You can say admit to doing something or admit doing something. There's no difference in meaning. You can use whichever you prefer. We have fancy, fancy doing something, risk, deny, mind. Would you mind helping me? It's always with the ing form. Would you mind doing something? Recommend, suggest, suggest doing something, miss, involve, practice, finish, keep, and justify. An example could be, we enjoy taking long walks on Sundays. I've put a little note here as well because it can be quite useful to remember that as most phrasal verbs are usually followed by a preposition, they usually contain a preposition, they are almost always going to be followed by a gerund because hopefully you already know, or if not you will now, that when we use a preposition, we usually follow a preposition with the ing form, with the gerund. After adjectives, we tend to use the infinitive, but after prepositions, we tend to use the gerund. So as phrasal verbs contain prepositions, they are usually followed by the gerund. She ignored the phone and carried on doing her work. Moving on to our next point, we have the verbs which are followed by the infinitive. So these are some common and useful verbs which are always followed by the infinitive when used with a second verb. We have want, intend, pretend, afford. We can afford to do something, or we can't afford to do something. We don't have enough money. Plan, wait, decide, fail. They failed to win the football match. Threaten, promise, apply, apply to do something, choose to do something, expect and hope, I hope to see you next week. Refuse, tend, agree, offer, seem, she seems to be a bit sad, is everything okay? And manage. We could see an example sentence such as, she was pretending not to see me. So as you can see here, we've used a past continuous. So the first verb is in the present participle, and then we have the infinitive after that. It's actually a negative infinitive, not to do something. So if we want to make that second verb negative, we simply put not before to, and there we have created the negative infinitive. There are not as many verbs to remember which can be used with the object and the gerund, which I think is good news. And in fact, many of these verbs are what we call sense verbs. We have feel, hear, see, smell. I smelt something burning in the kitchen. Find, watch, notice, like. I like you coming to see me every weekend. Dislike. I dislike you smoking. And don't mind. For example, I don't mind you borrowing my book as long as you give it back. Now be careful because some of the sense verbs can also be used with the bare infinitive, so we'll see them again later. And if we use them with the gerund, we observed some of the action. And when we use it with the bare infinitive, we observed all of the action. For example, we watched the birds feeding their babies. So we saw some of the process. If you compare with we watched the birds feed their babies, we saw it from the beginning to the end. So we watched the birds feeding their babies is part of the action, and we watch the birds feed their babies is from the beginning to the end, the complete action. I hope that makes sense. We'll see that again later. So now it's time to look at verb with the object and the infinitive. So the common verbs which can be followed by an object plus the full infinitive. Remember, the full infinitive is the infinitive with to. These verbs include ask, remind, we can remind somebody to do something, advise, invite, encourage, help somebody to do something. That can also be used with the bare infinitive, so we will see that one again. Teach somebody to do something, allow, warn, need, persuade somebody to do something, tell. So remember with tell takes an object. Tell somebody to do something. Say is different, which is where some people get confused between say and tell, but tell always takes an object. Order somebody to do something. Cause something to happen. Convince, trust, send. We can send somebody to do something. I sent him to the post office to buy stamps. Challenge, permit, and motivate. For example, listening to music motivates me to exercise for longer. Moving on to verbs with the bare infinitive, the important thing to remember here is we are going to be using modal verbs with the bare infinitive, the infinitive without to. Here are the modal verbs that we have in English. Must. I must wake up early tomorrow. She can play the piano. You should go to the dentist if you have toothache. Could you help me? You may borrow my key if you have forgotten yours. I would come with you if I could, and he might call you later. So with modal verbs, you must never use to. It's never I must to wake up. It is always I must wake up. However, you do need to be a bit careful with semi-modals. They work in a similar way to modal verbs in that they change modality, but they look a bit different. They contain to, like ought to. So ought to has the same meaning as should. It's a bit more formal, but it has the same meaning, like it's a good idea. Right? You should go to the dentist. You ought to go to the dentist. Need to and have to. So as you can see, they have similar meanings to the modal verbs, but because they contain to, they have the tendency to cause a little bit of confusion. But if you are working with one of the pure modal verbs, then they must never be followed with the full infinitive, only with the bare infinitive. Next, we have the verb plus the object plus the bare infinitive. Now, the first 5 verbs that we have here that take the object and the bare infinitive were also in the section with verb plus object plus gerund. And if you remember, when they are followed with the gerund, we observed or saw heard part of the action. When we use it with the bare infinitive, we saw, observed, or heard all of the action. So that is the slight difference in meaning there between using the gerund and the bare infinitive. Other three important verbs which take the object and the bare infinitive are help, let, and make. Now again, you might remember that we saw help with object and the full infinitive. You can help somebody to do something or help somebody do something. The meaning is the same, so it doesn't matter, whichever one you feel more comfortable using. Then we have let. The parents let their children stay up late as it was a special occasion. You let somebody do something. You give them permission to do something. And we also have make. For example, the parents made their children go to bed early because they had school the next day. So in that case, they obligate them to do something. However, be careful because when make is used in the passive form, it is followed by the full infinitive. So you have to be a bit careful if you use make in the passive, full infinitive. For example, I was made to work late. You can add by my boss if you want to add the agent, or my boss made me work late. I was made to work late if the focus is on you and not on the boss, or my boss made me work late if you want to use that in an active sentence. Now for the verbs which everybody tends to like because they can be followed by the gerund or the infinitive with no change in meaning or such a small change in meaning that it's not worth worrying about. So these verbs are begin, start, continue, bother, love, and hate. I wouldn't bother to call her because she never answers the phone, or I wouldn't bother calling her because she never answers the phone. There is no difference in meaning there. You can choose whichever you prefer. But one thing to note is, if the first verb is in the present participle, use the infinitive because it sounds better. You're not using two ing forms, one after the other. It sounds better to say it was starting to snow than it was starting snowing. So if you have the present participle before, use the infinitive. If not, it doesn't matter. And of course, we have to look at the verbs which can be followed by the gerund or the infinitive, but the meaning changes, and these can be quite confusing. So we will look at the verbs. Luckily, there are not very many. So we will look at these verbs that change when you use the infinitive and when you use the gerund. The first one is remember. So remember plus infinitive means to do something you were planning to do. I remembered to lock the door this morning. I was planning to lock the door and I locked it. I remembered to lock the door. Remember plus gerund is to think about a past event. I will always remember going on a plane for the first time. Okay, I'm thinking about this past event and it will always be in my memory. I will always remember doing it. Then we have forget. Forget with infinitive is not do something you were planning to do. I think I forgot to lock the door this morning. I'll have to go back and check. Okay, so now I know I didn't, or I think I didn't do something that I was planning to do. I forgot to do it. Forget with the gerund is not be able to remember something, not be able to remember a past event. And we usually use this with will never, can't, or won't. I'll never forget going on a plane for the first time. The meaning is the same as I will always remember going on a plane for the first time. The next verb is mean. Mean plus infinitive means intend. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I didn't intend to offend you. Mean plus gerund means involve. Taking that job will mean travelling around the country. Taking that job will involve travelling around the country. I hope the meaning is clear between those two. The next verb is stop. Stop plus infinitive is to stop one action in order to do something else. And you can often remember stop plus infinitive by thinking, oh, would I say in order to? And if you could say in order to, then you probably need the infinitive. While walking home, I stopped to buy some bread. I stopped in order to buy some bread. I had to stop one action so that I could do the next action. Stop with gerund is to quit or no longer do something. She stopped going to the gym when she injured her back. So she used to do something and now she doesn't do it anymore. She stopped going. Regret with infinitive is used in specific formal situations to give bad news. And so because it's used to give bad news, we use it with very specific verbs, such as inform, say, tell, and advise. We regret to inform passengers that the flight has been cancelled. And the more day-to-day regular meaning of regret is used with the gerund, because this is when you feel bad about something that happened in the past. She regrets not taking the job she was offered. So she wishes that she had taken the job that she was offered. She feels bad that she didn't take the job. Moving on to need. Need plus infinitive is when it is necessary for someone to do something. It's an active sentence. I need to clean my car this weekend. It is necessary for me to clean my car this weekend. When we use need with the gerund, this is an alternative to using the passive. Something needs to be done. The car needs cleaning this weekend. Or we could say the car needs to be cleaned. You could use a regular passive form. But we often say the car needs cleaning. It doesn't matter who cleans the car. The important thing is that the car gets cleaned. And the final verb that we have today is try. Try plus infinitive means to make a particular effort to do something. I tried really hard to convince her, but she wouldn't listen to me. Try with gerund, on the other hand, means to do something as an experiment to see if it works. This is the typical situation. If the internet is slow, try restarting your Wi-Fi router to see if that helps. So it's like an experiment or a test. Maybe this will make a difference, maybe it won't, but we will try doing it to see if we get a good result. Now let's put your knowledge to the test with a short gerunds and infinitives quiz. I will give you the sentence with the second verb missing. I will tell you what verb you need, and you need to decide whether you need the gerund or the infinitive. The first sentence is, excuse me, would you mind with this? The verb you need is help. So is it, would you mind to help me, or would you mind helping me? The correct answer is helping. Excuse me, would you mind helping me with this? Because mind is followed by the gerund. Number 2. After hours of questioning, she admitted the money. The verb is steal. It should be stealing. After hours of questioning, she admitted stealing the money. Remember, after admit, you can use the preposition to, but we still use the gerund. So an alternative is, she admitted to stealing the money, or she admitted stealing the money. Question 3. Did you manage the report on time? Did you manage to finish the report on time? Number 4. If you don't leave now, you risk your train. So this is missing. You risk missing your train because risk is followed by the gerund. Number 5. I was made aloud in front of the class. Be careful because this is a passive. It should be, I was made to read aloud in front of the class. I was made to read because it is a passive. If we transform it into an active sentence, it would be, the teacher made me read in front of the class with the bare infinitive. Number 6. Please tell me you didn't forget the tickets. That's actually okay without the verb, but we're going to use a verb to practice with gerunds and infinitives. It should be to bring. Please tell me you didn't forget to bring the tickets. Number 7. I can't remember him, so maybe he doesn't know the meeting is cancelled. So it's not in my memory. It should be the gerund. I can't remember telling him. It's not in my memory. So maybe he doesn't know the meeting is cancelled, because if I didn't tell him, it's possible he doesn't know. Number 8, if you have a headache, try a nap. Maybe it will help. It's worth a try. It's an experiment, so it's gerund. If you have a headache, try taking a nap. Maybe it will help. It's worth a try. Number 9, we regret that your application has been unsuccessful. So here we have bad news, so it should be in the infinitive form. We regret to inform you that your application has been unsuccessful. And number 10, our last question of the day is, oh, please stop. I'm sure everything will be fine. It should be gerund. Please stop complaining. I'm sure everything will be fine. I'm saying no longer do this. It's not to stop one thing in order to do something else. It's no longer complain.
That is it for today's lesson. I hope that you found something useful and new here for you. Let me know in the comments section below how you did in the quiz. And while you are there, if you have found this lesson useful, please don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. Thank you very much for watching. Go and check out another lesson right now.